Most of you folks have been attending the church long enough that you know Nathan Day and his family. But for some of you, you haven't seen him, and Nathan is our church missionary. We are his home church.
I'm the overseas missionary.
There he goes. He's in Ukraine. That's a long drive. That's a long drive. And Frank, thank you for allowing me to come up and introduce Nathan. I know that you wanted to, but I appreciate it. Nathan, as I said, this is his home church, and we help support his work over there in Ukraine, as some of the other churches and groups in the area, they give to us in Nathan's behalf, and we pass it on. And Nathan Day, his wife Caitlin, and the three children, we have Melissa and Lydia and Brianna and the new baby, Jonathan. Some of you haven't seen him yet. So without stealing any more of Nathan's thunder, I'm going to allow him to tell you exactly what he does and how he does it.
As Gary said, I've been in Ukraine for 15 years, and Caitlin and I got married 9 years ago, so she's been with me for 9 of those years. And then you have the kids, and they've pretty much grown up in Ukraine, so if you want to talk to the career missionaries in the family, you should probably really go talk to them, because they've been there their entire lives. Before I get too far, I want to mention that there's going to be a little time for question and answers here at the end of the service. But if you don't get your question answered, don't worry. I'll be hanging around for the fellowship time afterwards, so we can do some more question and answers across the hallway. And I think maybe the ladies want to hear a little bit from Caitlin as far as what life is like over there in Ukraine being a missionary wife. In case you're wondering what's going on with the shirt right here, this is a traditional Ukrainian shirt. It's an embroidered shirt, and they call it a vyshyvanka. Don't worry, there won't be a test. You don't have to remember that. And mine is blue, although they often come in red or black. Darren was actually telling me that he has one that his foreign exchange student gave him that unfortunately doesn't fit him very well, so I guess that's probably why he doesn't wear it very often. But for those of you who may be a little bit rusty on your high school geography, here's a little refresher. Ukraine is obviously highlighted there in blue, and let's see if my little pointer works. I can't really see where it's pointing. But you got Russia. Russia is over there to the east of Ukraine, big bad Russia. Then you have to the south, you have the Black Sea and Turkey, and then obviously off to the east is the rest of Europe. And Ukraine, as far as language goes, is very much of a bilingual country. In the part of Ukraine where we live, the western part, people predominantly speak Ukrainian, although most folks understand and speak Russian as well. The farther east you get, closer to Russia, you run into more people whose primary language is Russian, but they also usually understand and speak Ukrainian as well. And Ukrainian sounds something like this. Всім привіт, я тут перед вами і не знаю, що казати, тому просто треба щось сказати. And that meant like, hello everyone, I'm standing before you here today and I have to say something, I don't know what to say, so I'm just saying something. And that's Ukrainian. I actually do understand Russian more or less, but I don't really speak it, so just in case there's any native Russian speakers around here, I'm not even going to try because I'll just embarrass myself. If we zoom in a little bit closer here, you have Ukraine, or zoomed in map of Ukraine. We're located in Lviv, which is the red dot over on the far western side, right next to Poland. And we are, or put it this way, if you have paid attention to the news over the past 5 years, you've probably heard that Ukraine has had a lot of issues with Russia. And let me see if I can, it's still not working. I'll just step right over here. About 5 years ago, Ukraine took over, or not Ukraine, Russia took over the Crimean Peninsula right here. So that was kind of a big deal. And then shortly thereafter, there was a bunch of separatists that took over an area of Ukraine, which was more like right over in this area. And the conflict over there is still ongoing. There's still battle lines and shots being fired, and they have new ceasefires every month, and nobody pays attention to them. So. And then, of course, just a month or two ago, right over here in the strait between Crimea and Russia, there were those 3 Ukrainian warships that were seized. So, unfortunately, the conflict with Russia is ongoing. But the good news is that we're just about as far away from it as you can get while still being in the same country. And Ukraine is about the size of Texas. So, if you've ever been to Texas, you know that Texas is really, really big. And so we're a good distance away from that conflict, and we feel safe and doesn't really affect us, which we're very happy about. When it comes to religion, Ukraine is primarily Orthodox. People go to the Orthodox Church, and if you want to know what the Orthodox Church is like, just imagine the Catholic Church with the priests and the robes and the incense and the icons and all that kind of stuff. It's just a slightly different flavor. It's the Orthodox flavor of it as opposed to the Catholic flavor. And then as far as our family goes, we're independent missionaries, like Gary was saying. We're basically sent out of our home church. We're not with a missions organization per se, but we work on the field with several other independent missionaries who have been sent out of their home churches as well. Now, unfortunately, this picture is woefully out of date. It was actually taken a few days before Melissa was born, and Melissa is 8 years old now. And but you can see that Caitlin and I are right there in the middle, and then to our right you have Josh and Kelsey Steele. They're our very good friends and partners over there. And then on the far right is Patricia. She's actually my mother-in-law, and she's not a missionary per se, but she is our secretary, and so she deposits our checks and gets our mail and does all those very boring but necessary things that have to be done. And then to our left, you have the Beal family. And Jesse and Teresa actually left the team in the past 6 months. They had some health problems that required them to return to the States, and they weren't able to continue being a part of the ministry, so they have unfortunately officially left the team. And then to the far left is Denise, and she unfortunately also looks like she will probably be leaving our team in the not too distant future. God's kind of moving her on. So but it's not all doom and gloom with people leaving the team. The good news is that we've actually had some people join the team. This family is the Jalabi family, and the husband's name is Tolik, and the wife's name is Nastya. And in case you haven't guessed, they're a Ukrainian family. And we've known Tolik and Nastya for years. And Tolik, he actually majored in Ukrainian when he went to college, so he's like an English major, except he's a Ukrainian major. And he also speaks English. He's fluent in English. And so he's been a huge help to our team when it comes to translating material or proofing material that we've already developed. So it's been nice to have him. In addition, it's just nice to have a Ukrainian perspective on the team. Josh and I, we've both been in Ukraine for a long time. We speak the language fluently. We know the culture, but we're still Americans, and sometimes we still view things through American lenses, and so it's nice to have a Ukrainian on the team to kind of give a little bit of a Ukrainian perspective. It's looking like Tolik probably will also take over some of Denise's responsibilities if and when she leaves the team, so we're glad to have them around. And then the other addition to the team is Ben Sargent. He's the guy in the green and the beard there on the front row, and we met him in 2015 when he came for our summer missions project called CMO, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But he kind of came, fell in love with what we were doing, and he's kind of been a friend and a mentor to us ever since. And he actually returned to Ukraine this past summer for our most recent summer project, and when Jesse left the team, then Ben was kind of a natural fit to step in and take his place. So we're really glad to have him on the team as well. He's not a missionary per se, he's just a regular guy in the States with a regular job. But he comes over for the summers, and he's on our board of directors, so we're really glad to have him on the team as well. Our team, in case I neglected to mention, is Euro Team Outreach. That's what we call ourselves, or ETO. And as a team, we have goals. The first one is obviously to preach the gospel. Second is to teach the Bible. And the third is to disciple men in missions. So hopefully in the next few minutes, you'll get a better idea of how we go about trying to accomplish those goals. And when it comes to the proclaiming the gospel and teaching the Bible, our main venue for doing that is what we call Bible First. Bible First is a correspondence course, which means it's a series of lessons that someone can study through. And what we'll do is someone will say, I'd like to study the Bible, so we'll send them the first lesson for the course. So they'll read through the lesson, read the scripture references, answer the comprehension questions in the back, and then they'll send the lesson to us. We'll grade it, answer any questions that they may have asked us, and then we'll send them their lesson back along with the next lesson so they can kind of study through the course. And this course, Bible First, which is what we call it, it's 20 lessons that cover the book of Genesis. And despite being an Old Testament book, Genesis is actually a really fantastic place to teach important foundational concepts like who is God, what is sin, how is sin paid for, what is God's attitude towards sin? How is atonement made, and all those different kinds of things. For example, you have the story of Noah. When we go through the story of Noah, we talk about how mankind was sinful, and that made God not very happy, and so he decided to send judgment. But he also provided a way of escape, and so for those who heeded the warnings, there was a way to escape from the judgment that was coming. So you can see there's a lot of really good parallels there with the gospel story in Christ. This right here is an actual spread from one of our lessons, the one about Noah, as you can tell from the picture. So, you can see there's pictures, there's text, there's like a little box up on the top left that is a key concept box. It's kind of underscoring one of the main points we're trying to make. And then down on the bottom right, there's a little did you know box, and it's talking about, how big a cubit was, how big the ark was, how big it was in relation to other boats. So we try to make studying the Bible to be interesting as possible. But the course has allowed us to get by a couple of big problems, one of which is that Ukrainians are very skeptical of anyone that's not a part of the Orthodox Church, but most of them believe that the Bible is the Word of God. So the Bible is a point of common ground between us. So we'll come to someone and we'll say, you know what, our goal is to encourage you to read the Bible, which is something that they think most everybody should do. And so then when we invite them to sign up for a course that teaches them more about the Bible, then that's not as threatening as inviting them to come to a Protestant church service, because they're Orthodox, we're Protestant, and the two don't mix. So that's been one thing that's been good. The other thing that the course has allowed us to overcome are the limitations of geography. If you think about Colorado and you think about all the people that live in Colorado, there's probably a lot of people that are open to the gospel, but for the folks in Pueblo or Denver or Durango or something like that, they might be open to the gospel, but they can't really come to Generations to attend church services or come here for a Bible study. So if you want to reach those people, you have to go to them. And that's something that the correspondence course has allowed us to do. When there are people that are open, even if they're not in our general geographic area, we can still go to them, so to speak, with the correspondence course, and we can teach them the Bible. And then in addition to Ukrainian, Bible First is also available in English. As we were using it ourselves, a lot of people heard about it and they wanted to know, hey, can we get a hold of this? Can we use this? So we made it available in English, and there are now folks all across America who are using Bible First in one way or another. In particular, there's one lady named Maria who, I believe she's from California, and she got a hold of our Bible First lessons, and she wanted to use them in her ministry to inmates. And the only problem was that most of her inmates were Spanish speaking, and our lessons were in English. And so she got in touch with us, and she actually started translating the course into Spanish. She's now finished that. The course has been translated into Spanish, and she's using it in her ministry. But Maria is one of several freelancers, if you will, that I want to introduce you to, that God has kind of brought into our lives that aren't necessarily an official part of our team, but God has kind of brought into our life, and they've really helped us out in a big way. Another one of those freelancers is a young man named Ralph. I believe Ralph was actually still a teenager. But about the time that Maria was finishing her translation, God brought Ralph into our life. He heard about our ministry. He wanted to kind of help out, and he's kind of a techie, geeky computer guy. And so he said, hey, is there any computer stuff that I can help you with? And one of the jobs that we gave him was taking Maria's translation. She had just translated it, and all the text was in Word. We needed to have the text in a little bit different format, so we put him in charge of reformatting that text into this certain format that we needed it to be in. And the interesting thing about Ralph is that he's from Canada, and he's actually from Quebec. So his first language is French, but he also speaks English. But his family spent some time in Mexico as missionaries, so he actually learned Spanish. So he was a prime candidate to work with this text. And in time, he wasn't just reformatting the text. He actually started proofing the text. He was working with Maria. Maria kind of did like a quick and dirty translation, whereas Ralph was very detail-oriented. And so he was going through and he was finding typos and correcting things and standardizing things. And so Ralph is a really amazing guy. We're really glad that the Lord brought him into our lives. And he continues to, even though over the years, he's continued to, I guess he's been almost 2 years since we met him. He's continued to help us out. Over his Christmas break, I believe it was, he took all the text that he and Maria had been working on and he laid it out for print. So, you had that spread from the lessons and it had Ukrainian text in it. He basically took that same spread and he put the Spanish text in there. So hopefully here in the not too distant future, once we can verify that everything was laid out correctly, we can actually have the Spanish lessons in print. So Ralph is actually, at the moment, he's working on a computer degree up there in Canada, but his eventual goal is to join us full-time in Ukraine. And so we can't wait. Ralph's a great guy. We're really excited that the Lord brought him into our lives. Even if he never makes it to Ukraine, he's still being a real big help to the ministry all the way from over there in Quebec. And like I said, I think the guy's not even 20 years old yet. He's still a teenager. So praise the Lord for Ralph. So anyway, so that's Bible First. I want to take a few moments now and talk about Carpathian Mountain Outreach, which I mentioned earlier. And we also call it CMO. And this is our summer project where we invite young men from the States to come over. And the goal of CMO is evangelism. So that's when we're reaching out to Ukrainians very actively. But it's also to disciple the young guys that come over, to kind of give them a taste, give them a hands-on experience of what it's like to be a missionary overseas, and kind of equip them to be missionaries, whether it's overseas or whether it's in the States. So this right here is the group that we had in 2016. One of the neat things about that summer was that my brother Joseph came over. Some of you know him. You probably remember him as a little bitty kid, but he's not a little bitty kid anymore. He's the guy in the orange, second from the right, so it was a lot of fun to get to spend the summer with him, work alongside him. We then had to skip the summer of 2017 for various reasons, and then this right here is the group that we had in 2018. Carpathian Mountain Outreach, as you may guess from the name, Carpathian Mountain Outreach. We do outreach, we do a lot of work in the mountains, and this is our trusty map of Ukraine. We're up there, once again, the red dot, and the Carpathian Mountain, most of Ukraine's pretty flat, but the mountains, the Carpathian Mountains, are down here in this area. So we'll drive south from Lviv or take a train or something like that. And usually what we do is we'll go down on the weekends. The weekends are our time in the mountains. So we'll go down there and we'll show an evangelistic film in a certain village. Usually what we'll do is we'll take one day, and that's the day that we schedule the showing and we advertise the showing. And our main mode of advertising is to go through the village and hand out invitations to people, since most of these guys come over from America and they can't really speak, but hey, they can give out pieces of paper. So some parts of the villages are nicer, like you see here. The road is relatively free of potholes, and there's a nice house in the background with a nice fence. Other parts of the village tend to be a little bit more primitive. Just kind of got a little path going on here and a wood fence, and not quite so fancy. So we'll go through the villages, we'll pass out these invitations until the cows come home, sometimes literally. There's a lot of cows in these Ukrainian villages, and the cows do come home several times a day to get milked. We spend 2 days in the mountains. One day is when we schedule the film and advertise it, and then the next day is when we actually show the film. Most of the villages have a little community center. We're usually able to set up in there. We show the film, people come and watch it. Afterwards, there's always a short gospel message that's presented, and then when people leave, we pass out gospel literature, and it all has our contact information, so if anyone wants to know more, then they can definitely get into contact with us. And while we're in the mountains, we're usually there for 2 days, so while we're there, we'll stay in tents, and the guys always love it, and it's kind of old hat for me, but it's not too bad as long as it's not raining. Sometimes it can be a little rainy up there in those mountains. So that's what we do. We spend a couple days a week working in the mountains, and then the rest of the time we work in the cities of Western Ukraine. This right here is one of the areas of Lviv. You can see there's a lot of high-rise buildings there, and one of our main ministry activities in the city is we'll go from building to building and we'll pass out tracts in the mailboxes. I know in America you can't do that because it's property of the Postmaster General, but nobody knows who owns these P.O. boxes, so you can do whatever you want. But what we'll do is we'll go from building to building, we'll pass out these tracts, and I was talking a few minutes ago about Bible First and the students that we have with that. Most of our initial students came from these types of outreaches. We would pass out these tracts, people would hear about the Bible course, they would sign up, and that's where we got our initial group of students. However, a fun fact is that about half of our existing students are actually referrals from other people that were taking the course. So it's always, they say that friends are the best salesmen. It's always nice when the people that you're working with are then bringing their friends or their family and encouraging them to study the Bible. Another thing we did this past summer, for the first time in probably about 10 years, was we did chalk art and street preaching. The way that works is we have an easel, we set it up. You can kind of see like a bright yellow background over there. I'm the designated artist on the team. Not necessarily because I'm terribly artistic, but I guess I'm the best we have. But anyway, I'll get up there. I have 2 pictures that I draw, and I've practiced them a lot, so I'm really good at them. If you just asked me to freelance something, I probably wouldn't turn out very well, but I can do these pictures well. So I'll get up there and I'll start drawing this picture with chalk, and in time, the people that are walking by, they'll stop and they'll see what's going on, then someone will stand up and they'll give a short gospel message. And so that's the street preaching and the chalk art. And then another thing that we did this summer for the first time was we went out on the street and we just talked to people. What we did, instead of just trying to start conversations cold turkey, was we actually put together a survey about the Bible. So we'd ask people, do you have a Bible at home? Do you read the Bible? What do you think about the Bible? Is it God's Word? Is it just, book of, good advice or what have you? And so we would go through this survey, and usually we would at least get contact information for the folks that we talked to so that we could send them more literature. And sometimes over the course of the survey, you would understand that the person was open, and it opened the door to actually witnessing to the person. So that was, like I said, that was something that we did this past summer with the guys for the very first time, and a lot of them really, really liked it. We actually, the guy standing there kind of in the purple plaid shirt, he came down, he's from Greeley actually, and he came down to visit us yesterday, and he said that he is, he'll go out on his college campus and he'll witness to folks, and he'll talk to them. I think he uses the same survey that we put together, but he said, I never would have thought that would have been something that I would have enjoyed or that I would have liked doing, but he said, you guys made us go out there and do it, and I realized that I actually really liked it. So he's now using that same method on his college campus to reach out to the other kids on his campus. Kids, I guess. When you're as old as I am, then college students feel like kids. You guys are probably looking at me saying, hey, who's the kid? You're the kid. But anyway, so that was one thing that we did this past summer. And then we always take a day and we do a missions conference. Most of CMO is very much hands-on. We're out there on the street doing ministry, but we always take one day and have some concentrated classroom time, and we explain to the guys some of the things that we've learned in our years on the mission field. We tell them kind of the method behind the madness, why we do the things the way we do them, and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's Carpathian Mountain Outreach. Now I'd like to jump back to Bible First for a minute and talk about it, or maybe I should say Bible First Online. For a long time, we've wanted to make the correspondence course available online, and this is a screenshot from a web application that we're developing, which will allow folks to work through those Bible lessons, which will be more attractive to a younger generation that's all into their smartphones and tablets and such. But it will also be nice for us because it will cut down on some of the hassle and expense of printing and shuffling paper around all the time. Obviously, we'll still keep the paper course around because some people prefer paper, but if there are people that prefer the online version, then we want to meet them where they're at and have something for them. So we're really excited about this application that we're developing, but it's something that we don't want to keep to ourselves. As we've been developing it in such a way so that we can have our own account, so to speak, with our own students, but we've set it up in such a way so that other people can sign up for an account and they can have their own students. So this would be a tool that other churches or missionaries or individuals could use in their own ministries. They could have their own students, separate from our students. We also when our students finish the course, we always send them a survey and ask them some questions, and most of them have indicated that they would be interested in learning more about becoming a Bible First coach. So that would be really exciting if we could get to the point to where our students study through the course, and then they can transition into the people that are actually coaching others through the course. And really, when you think about it, that's what the Great Commission is all about, is that we go out and we win people, and then we teach them to win others. So I feel like there's a lot of potential there. Now, obviously for us, our main need is to have the web application running and have Ukrainian lessons in it, but we also have the English text ready to go, so there will be English available, there'll be Spanish available, and other languages if and when they get translated. So this is something that we can use in Ukraine. Somebody could use this to minister to English-speaking people or Spanish-speaking people. So we're, like I said, really excited about the potential there. Unfortunately, the application is not quite ready yet. We were about this close to having an alpha version ready for our own personal use this past spring, but then we had to put web development on the back burner because we had our summer outreach coming down the pipes, and we had to get ready for that. So we had to put web development on the back burner. But our goal is to get there, get back to that as soon as possible, and our hope is that we will have that alpha version running sometime this spring, and then we'll be able to start using that for our own personal use, kind of work out some of the bugs, and then at some other point in the future, then open that up to other people. Which brings me to another freelancer that the Lord's brought into our lives. This is Trevor here. He's there in between Josh and I. And Trevor is a professional web developer from Florida. Now, he has a full-time job, but sometimes on the evenings or the weekends, he's available to help us write code or kind of be available as a consultant to tell us all the things that we're doing wrong when we're writing our code. But it's been really good to have him around because, like I said, he's a professional web developer. I'm an amateur web developer. And Josh is a good web developer, but he's not a professional. He's a missionary who moonlights as a web developer. So it's been really good to have a professional around to kind of keep an eye on us and make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot when we're writing some of this code. And then most of this he's done from the States, but then about a year ago he actually came to Ukraine for 2 weeks, and the three of us pretty much just locked ourselves in a room for 2 weeks and did nothing but write code. And so we actually made a lot of really good progress, and it was good to all be in the same room together. So anyway, so that's about it. While our group has continued to reach out to Ukrainians over the past couple of years, I would say more and more our focus is turning to equipping and training others to reach out to the lost. And as you've seen, there's a lot going on in our ministry. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different people that kind of are contributing their little pieces, which on the one hand is exciting, but it's also a little scary, or at least for somebody like me. When I see all that stuff going on, it can be a little bit overwhelming because it's just there's a lot going on there. And last week Pastor Tim talked about John the Baptist and was talking about how God gave John the Baptist's ministry was not his ministry, it was given to him from the Lord, and that it was he had his ministry, and then it was kind of eclipsed by Jesus' ministry. And while I don't feel like my ministry is necessarily being eclipsed by anybody else's ministry, it was a good reminder to me that my ministry is not my ministry, it's actually God's ministry, and I don't need to stay up at night worrying about how this whole thing is going to come together. It's the Lord's ministry, I get to be a part of it, and He'll work out a lot of those details. So, pray for us that we would be sensitive to the Lord's leading, that and that we wouldn't get in the way of what He wants to do with the ministry in Ukraine. So anyway, unless the Lord leads differently, here are some of our plans for the future. When it comes to Bible First, our first major goal is to release this web application. Like I said, hopefully sometime this spring we'll be able to start using it ourselves internally, and then in time we want to make it available to other people to use. And that will involve writing documentation and how-tos and tutorials and all that kind of stuff, so that'll be a decently big endeavor. Then I talked about the Spanish course. We obviously want to get that printed and available for people who want to use Bible First for reaching out to Spanish folks. And then we also actually have a rough draft of the course in Russian. At this point, we don't have a big need for the Russian course, but at some point in the future, we'd like to get that translation polished up and proved so that if and when the time comes that there is a need for Bible First in Russian, that Bible First will be available in Russian. As far as Carpathian Mountain Outreach goes, we're planning on doing another outreach this summer. So we're actually just last few days, Josh and I were finalizing the details for the summer outreach. So there'll be an announcement going out on the ministry blog here in a few days, hopefully. So if you know any young men that might be interested, be sure to tell them about Carpathian Mountain Outreach. So we're hoping that God will bring us a team. We just don't know exactly who's going to be on that team, but we're looking forward to it. And as far as our very near future plans go, our family is actually leaving for Texas on Wednesday. My wife was born and raised in Texas, so we're going back down there for a month. And so this is unfortunately our last Sunday here at Generations. And then on February 21st, we'll actually be going back to Ukraine. So we're down to not much more than a month. It's hard to believe it's gone by so quick. So in order to, if you'd like to stay in contact with us, you can go to our blog, daysinukraine.com, and I usually post decently regular updates when I'm not in America. Time in America has been great, but it's been really, really busy, and I haven't posted a thing since we got back here to the States. But you can go to that address, and you can put your email address in, and you will get notified when any new posts get added to the blog. That address is also on the prayer cards that Gary mentioned that are out there in the foyer. And if going online is not your cup of tea, there's actually a sign-up sheet out there next to the prayer cards. You can put your name and your email address on there, and I'll make sure that you get added to the list. You can also learn more about our ministry at euroteamoutreach.org. That's our team website. That's where the announcement will be going about Carpathian Mountain Outreach here, hopefully in the next few days. You can go there and learn more about the ministry. You can also sign up for updates there. If you like updates, we'll send you updates. And so you can go there as well. And then lastly, I'd just like to say thank you to you guys for your support. When I went to the field 15 years ago, Generations was my only supporting church. And you're not my only supporting church anymore. Other churches have come on board, but you guys have been supporting me longer than anyone else has. And in dollar terms, you're still our biggest supporter. And so, when you see this ministry up here, it's not just my ministry, it's your ministry as well. So thank you for standing behind us, for supporting us, and for enabling us to do what we do. So I think that is about everything. Well, pop back there. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Connie.
When you're in the mountains and you're in the tents at night, do you have any little critters that come and annoy you?
No, it's usually big critters. It's usually the cows. I said it's not usually little critters, it's usually the big critters. It's the cows that come and annoy us. And usually it's not at night that the cows come, it's usually during the day. Usually we wind up camping in their pastures, and so they come through to get a bite to eat, and we kind of have to shoo the cows away to get them away, keep them away from our tents. So, yeah, Michelle.
Have you ever had any, have you ever had any, like anybody who came to you and said to leave the city or the town? You have, okay.
Yeah, we have. There's been a couple times where we set up someplace and somebody didn't like that our tents were there, and so they told us to leave, and so sometimes we've had to move on down the road. There's also been a couple of times, like in 2016, I believe it was, we made arrangements with the head of the village to show the film, but then the lady that was in charge of the community center, for whatever reason, she got a bee in her bonnet and she wouldn't let us show the film. We said, hey, we talked to the head, he said it was okay, and so we were getting set up, and she said, get out or I'll call the police, and so we had to leave. But that's the exception rather than the rule, thankfully. So, any other questions, Jeff?
I guess what I'm looking for, do you have this on? Oh, it's on. Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, I just have to take it off mute. So I guess I'm looking to hear from you how you felt led or what prompted you to select the Ukraine as a mission field. There's so many areas out there. You see, you're just one small piece of that whole area, and that's just one small piece of this world. It just seems to me, what prompted you, what led you, and then to match you up with your wife, Caitlin, and to get you two together, it just seems to me that has to be orchestrated by God. So I'm just curious to hear from you how God has spoken to you through this and led you through this.
Yeah, I'd say that growing up, I wanted to be a part of God's plan, whatever that was. I didn't necessarily have aspirations to become a missionary, per se, but I was just open to whatever the Lord had for me. And when I was 17, I went to a missions conference, and they talked about how it's important for us to be reaching out to the lost. And so I began trying to do that on my own. And then the Lord actually led me to a missions training school in Thailand. So I went there. I was there for 7 months, and that's where I met Joshua Steele, who's one of our missionary partners. And he had been in Ukraine. He went to Thailand to help run this school for a year, and then he invited me to go with him back to Ukraine. Kind of just told me about what his plans were. And I didn't necessarily feel led of the Lord to go to Ukraine, but it was just kind of an open door, and so I went with it. And God just kind of kept the door open, and I stayed there and learned the language. And I eventually actually met Caitlin in Lviv over there in Ukraine. She was a friend of Joshua Steele's wife, and she came over to kind of help them out with some child care during one of our summer outreaches, and we met, and the rest is history. So now we have 4 cute little kitties to show for it. So was that everything there? Or?
I answered it. Yeah, that's really neat. I guess the reason you inspire me, and I'm sure you inspire everybody in this congregation, the challenges you've had to take on in service to the Lord, and how He's opened up the doors and allowed you to develop in a whole new culture, a whole new world, a whole new language. Myself, I don't know that I could do that, but I know through God anything's possible. But coming from this area, I think you're from a farm or a ranch not too far from here.
Well, I actually grew up in Nebraska, and then when I was 16, my dad took a job with the Navigators, and we moved out here. So I'm kind of a cross between a country boy and a city boy, I guess.
Okay. So kind of in the country, or you kind of cross between the country and the city, and then find yourself now in the middle of all this wonderful activity and be fulfilling God's purpose for those people. I mean, I just am excited to see the work that you're doing, and to see when you come back here in a year from now.
Probably more like 2
years? Okay.
Or maybe 3. Don't tell Mom that. She'd like to see us as often as possible, but the family gets bigger and bigger, and it's harder to make those international trips. But yeah, well, praise the Lord. He's definitely been leading and guiding. And the funny thing is that in high school I started studying Spanish, and after a while I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't like learning foreign languages. So I quit learning Spanish. But then when I got to Ukraine, it was like, man, I got to know this language. And so I dug in, and so praise the Lord. Yes, Dee.
We really appreciate what you're doing. And I'm very, very impressed, but I also am inspired to realize that we need to take some of the things that you're doing and put them to work right here.
Hey, yeah, we want that Bible first.
We do, and we'd like a set of your studies in English. we might have some use for Spanish, but not an immediate use.
Yeah, well, that's why we don't use Russian, because I actually don't speak Russian.
Yeah,
we need somebody who speaks Russian to be able to run a Russian course.
We really, really, really need to employ some of your methods for reaching people, like that, where you go on the street and you question people about their knowledge of the Bible and that sort of thing. And we would just absolutely love it if you would share that data with us so that we can know that also.
For sure.
Okay, thank you.
Well, just being honest here.
Yeah.
I don't like talking to people in the street. But that was one of the nice things about the survey, was that you didn't just have to cold call, try to come up with something to talk about with some stranger on the street. You kind of had a little icebreaker, so I actually liked it better than I thought. My wife's signaling me from the back there. Yes, I did bring a set. So, they're in my backpack, wherever my backpack wound up. But I can definitely pull those out. Yeah, for sure.
You all can purchase the English lessons in the States if you wanted to use those in ministry of some sort.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you go to euroteamoutreach.org, there's information on there about the Bible course. You can learn about kind of, it'll show you where to buy it. It'll show you kind of there's like a set of instructional videos that we talked about, kind of how we use it, why we use it, and some of that kind of stuff. So you can definitely look into that.
Did you have some?
So, yes.
My question, Mike and I are new to this congregation, and we're really happy to be here. So we've never met you, we've really never heard about the things that you do, so it's really fun to hear what you're doing. But my questions, and I do love what you're doing, I'm kind of a little more curious about logistics of things. Do you work over there at all to get money, or is everything supported through the different groups that support you?
For the most part, I do not work. I don't have a job in Ukraine. I don't have like an American, I don't work remotely or anything like that. I'm pretty much fully supported by churches and individuals like you. We do actually have a couple of rent houses that bring in some residual income, so that's a little part of our support, but most of it just comes from churches and individuals.
Okay, so that was my second question. Do you own the places you live? Do you have a home base, or do villagers support you?
In Ukraine?
Yes.
We rent an apartment in Ukraine, and so that's kind of our home base. And then when we go to the villages, like I said, we're just kind of staying in tents.
Okay, and this is the last question.
Yeah, no problem.
Are your kids bilingual?
They are.
Oh, that's very cool. That's all. Thank you.
Sometimes I don't know exactly how much Ukrainian they know because they're kind of quiet and they don't use it very often. But they understand a lot more than they probably understand a lot more than I think they understand. And when Jonathan was born, Caitlin's mother came over to help out with the birth and help out with the kids. And he was born in Ukraine, along with Melissa and Lydia. Brianna's the only one that was actually born in the States. But the girls went with their grandmommy to the market and they translated for her. So I was, wow, pretty good. So good for them.
We also have a mother's helper that we employ a couple of times a week to help you with the children in the home. The primary reason for that was to bring language into our home. And so they speak with our nanny. She's a real loved person. We miss her. They speak with our nanny in Ukrainian only. And so that's when we get to hear a little bit of how much they know.
I have to vouch for you because I've been with you since you've gone, almost the whole. But I do want to say, to all your credit, I want to tell you guys how when Nathan decided to go to the Ukraine, I mean, you were single, you had this heart. I mean, how were we going to afford it? And I have to say, I admire you because he has a kind of a sense. He went out and he bought some homes and he fixed them up. So he could rent them because he knew that would be his income. Aren't I correct?
More or less.
Yeah. And he used his brothers to help with you. So I just have to say that, when we really are purposeful in our desire to serve the Lord, I mean, he really blesses that. And I just admire you because that's true. That was awesome that you did that. Went and looked for homes that were cheap so you could redo them, and yeah, that was awesome.
It's really when you step out to follow God, then God blesses that. And when I left for the mission field, I didn't necessarily go around and raise support. I had savings, but Pastor Tim said, you know what? When our young people step out and do stuff like this, we want to support them. And of course, my mom and dad, they supported me as well. And so that was all the support I had, was a little bit from Spring Valley, a little bit from my parents, and I actually didn't wind up having to use those savings that I had. And then the rental houses actually came later. There was a guy I know that's a big supporter of missions, and he's only ever written me one check, but he wrote me a check that was big enough for the down payment on a rent house and for the renovations. And so that's where God basically gave me my first rent house, and then we saved the income from that, and 4 years ago we were able to buy a second rent house. So yeah, they're here in the States. one is in Colorado, one is in Texas, and I'm kind of done with rent houses for now. But who knows? We'll see what the Lord does. But yeah, he's definitely blessed. And as the family has grown, he has continued to bless financially as well.